The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, how it all began. October 7, 2023, the world witnessed the start of an armed conflict between Hamas-led Palestinian militants and Israel. The armed group from Gaza sent rockets to the central and southern parts of Israel early morning and crossed the Gaza border fence, killing Israeli forces and civilians, including foreigners. Now, after more than a month, the war continues. How did this conflict begin? To answer this question, let us look into the long history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What is the biblical background of this dispute? The present-day Israel and Palestine territories have religious and historical importance. For the Jewish people, the land they possess today represents the promised land where their ancestors settled following the exodus from Egypt. The Lord God promised Abraham and his descendants Canaan, a land they can call their own. Genesis 17:8. Whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. From the Palestinian perspective, their biblical heritage connects them to this land. They trace their origins from the ancient Canaanites and Philistines, the people that remained undefeated in the time of Joshua. Joshua 13:1-4 clearly states this fact. No wonder the Philistines became Israel's perennial enemies until the time of King David and Solomon. Major battles between the Israelites and Philistines were recorded in the Bible. Only the Babylonian and Persian invaders completely destroyed Philistia as they conquered Israel. The battle between the descendants goes on, though. How did this controversy resurface? The Balfour Declaration in 1917, which we discussed in the previous video, advocated for a national home for the Jews. British promise and the Holocaust in the Second World War caused tens of thousands of Jews to return to the Palestinian land in the 1920s and 30s. However, clashes between the Jewish migrants and Palestinian Arabs continued. In February 1947, the United Nations approved a resolution splitting Palestine into two states, the Arab state and the Jewish state, declaring Jerusalem under UN trusteeship. The Palestinians refused, which led to continued violence in the area. Israel declared independence on May 15, 1948, the start of the Israeli-Arab War. 5 Arab states opposed the creation of Israel as a nation. Palestinians were forced to evacuate as Israel, with the help of its allies, won the war. Organized resistance against Israel grew in the 1950s, particularly the Palestine Liberation Organization in 1964. Thus, these armed conflicts continued in 1967 and 1987. The recent war that we just heard about is now led by the terrorist group Hamas. Nations already intervened, but more and more people, including children, are displaced and the death toll has increased. There is an ongoing debate as to who has the rightful claim to the land. From the reports of the early Jewish settlers in the 1850s, the region was barren and desolate. As this land flourished in the hands of God's chosen people, some of the Arabs came back. God's mighty hand is really working in this region. Between 1850 and 1948, none of the Arab states worked to declare it as a nation or as a state. It has been preserved for the Jewish people, fulfill God's promise to them. No wonder oppositions continue as God's chosen people occupy the promised land. As we reflect on what is happening in Israel today, why not say a prayer for God's continued intervention?